I'm going to talk about questions today because questions are very important in you getting more of what you want out of your sales position. And very few people have mastered the art of questioning or fact-finding or discovery. It's called a lot of different things. But today I want to give you some information on how you can be more effective at this, what I would say is probably one of the most critical parts of the sales process. And I promise you, it'll make your life easier. It'll make your pitch easier. You'll be set up better. And then when you get good information, you set your pitch up the right way, you do a good presentation, the close it's just easy. It's just easy. And I know that's something that everybody is interested in. And so if you have questions on questions, call into the show 305-865-8668, 305-865-8668. We're taking your calls today. Because we live. All right, so look, check it. Questions are the key to every deal that you will ever get in front of in your life. And the reason questions are the key is because questions reveal problems. And what is the number one reason why people make a decision to buy something? It's to solve a problem, right? So now your job as a salesperson is to figure out what those problems are. Now, in a typical sales process, you could have a phone transaction, you could have a face-to-face interaction. And so there's all different types of actual sales processes where this is very important. And it's different if you're, say, selling Sprint phones from a kiosk than it is if you were walking into a boardroom and there's going to be 12 people sitting around a table and you have an hour to present. It's going to be different when you're making a cold call than it is when you have a scheduled presentation or appointment. And so I'm going to cover a few things today that will make you asking questions a breeze in the presentation, so in the sales process. So if you have questions, again, you can call in 305-865-8668. I think we got full lines already, but keep calling because we want to hear from you. So if people buy things to solve problems and questions are your vehicle to reveal the problems, what you have to understand is that most people are reluctant to give up their problems because it's the key to closing a deal with them. And so the more savvy of a person you're dealing with, the more intelligent somebody is, the closer they're going to hold those problems. The last thing that people want to do is volunteer their problem that they're having, particularly if you're trying to sell them something. We see this on cold calls. You can definitely see it when you're in face-to-face meetings, people kind of holding their cards close to them because they don't want to give you too much information. That's how valuable questions are, and that's how valuable finding out the problem is, so much so to the fact that the customers will actually guard their information from them. So if you want to become great at asking questions in the process, you really need to think of it as like you're a detective. The only problem with that is if you've been in sales for any period of time, you've probably experienced this, where you feel like you're interrogating the customer, they feel like they're being interrogated, and then it starts to create conflict and friction, which is bad, something we definitely don't want to happen. So the idea is that you want to become a detective so that you can start gathering small little pieces of data and information in the fact-finding stage of the process so that you can put them all together to formulate, hey, this is how I need to sell somebody, right? That's what questions are. Questions are giving you the ammunition that you need to formulate your pitch so that you can get a yes response. So as you're working with people and you're starting to accumulate these little data points, what you have to continue thinking with is, where are you taking them, right? Like where are you going? Like are the questions you ask even valuable? If you go to a salesperson, you're like, hey, you need to ask more questions. They could start asking questions that are irrelevant. So questions are a very powerful thing, but questions can also cripple you. Because if you're asking questions that aren't relevant and that the buyer can't, basically put that question into context of your conversation, then they're actually going to pull back. So if you want to think of it like this, questions should be something that kind of feed the customer along through the sales process, right? It's like you're putting down I do this with my dog, I'll put down little treats. And then I'll be like, you can't, you don't go after it yet, right? And then I say, okay, and then he'll eat the treat. And then I put down another one and eat the treat. And the dogs start coming, right? So you want to do that in your sales process with your questions. You want to drop these questions so that the customers actually being drawn into the process by the questions that you're asking, because you're actually getting down into their business. You're showing interest. You're being interested in their business, their problem. And so as you start gathering that data, before you know it, you've set up perfectly for your presentation. You know, I guess the way I view questions is like in a perfect world, your sales pitch would represent, or it would be shown to the customer as a story of how they have this problem and they're struggling, and there's pain and there's loss and there's, you know, expense cost with this problem. And then, you know, kind of like the hero story. And then your product comes along and your product starts solving problem A, and then problem B, and then problem C and D. And then at the end, everybody's happy because the problems are solved, you're making more money, you're more efficient. So I view like the sales process as a story. And those questions that you ask early in the process will actually help you create the story of your pitch. So like when you start, like in our product, for example, questions that we like to ask help us set up our presentation. So in order to set our presentation up so that it's a tailored presentation, you've probably heard that word before, tailored, meaning it's specific to that customer. You know, we start asking questions about, you know, previous experiences. So, you know, have you guys ever used a third-party trainer in the past? What are you currently doing for training right now? What's working well? What's not? If you could change anything, what would it be? How frequently are you meeting? How's that working for you? Oh, wow, good. Tell me more about that. So we want to start collecting all of this data, because when I get down to, you know, okay, now that we've gone through all that, what are 2 things that if I could help you solve, you know, whatever the investment that we discussed at the beginning of this call would be an easy decision for you? Well, let's say it's sales process and follow-up, right? So I've asked all these questions. I've got all this data about how they train their people. Then on top of that, I've gotten from them their biggest headache, right? Their biggest, like, hey, these are 2 things that if you could fix, we'd sign up for your program today. That's a good question to ask. What's a problem I can solve for you that would cause you to sign up for us today? What problems are you having with your sales team that if I could solve for you, you would sign up for our program today? So again, you're starting to like build this story, right? You're collecting data so that you can build a story in your presentation that's tailored to them. So when a customer tells us that they don't have consistency, their people don't follow the sales process, there's no accountability, when they're telling me all those things, as I'm moving through the presentation, I'm making sure that I'm hitting each one of those points as it's relevant to them. We don't have consistency. You know, the onboarding process for new hires is really difficult. Hey, how many new hires do you have? Oh, we've got 6. Good. You know, how often do you guys have turnover? All the time. So how many new hires are you getting per month? We're probably getting 12 or 13 new hires per month. Good. And as people are giving you this data, you must write everything down. Not word for word, but enough for you to remember what they're talking about. So when I do a presentation, like here's an example of this is an example of some notes that I took from a call. I don't know if you can see that. It's an entire page of notes that I took on a call, and Rob's seen me do this. I take like an entire page of notes on the call, and then as I'm moving through presenting what we're going to do for them, I'm just checking off all these problems, all this stuff that they mentioned in the call, I'm bringing back to them so that I'm making sure that we're connecting the dots between their problem and the solution. And if you're not writing this down, if you don't have a notepad and you're not actively taking notes throughout phone calls or even in face-to-face interactions, if you're not doing that, there's no possible way your presentation will be as effective as it should be. So it's critical that you write this stuff down, and it shows people that you're interested in. So questions are the ammunition to everything you need to actually get a deal done. So I want to give you some examples of some situations and some scenarios where your question asking might change. These are real examples that we have here. So we make cold calls, right? We do a cold call. We get a decision maker on the phone. He says, you got 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes. Dude, you do not have time for the entire, let me get to know you and your business, right? So what do you have to do? You have to get into your presentation and try to pick that data up along the way, right? You got a shorter process, a shorter window, so you can't start with the interrogation because that's what it'll feel like. And the guy's gonna be like, I got I don't have time for this. I'm not interested. I got to get back to my day. This literally was a phone call we had maybe 7 days ago. Salesperson makes a cold call. He gets a decision maker on the phone. He pitches the call to his manager. The manager gets on, asks 3 or 4 questions, and the guy's like, dude, I got to get off the call. I'm not interested in this. Fortunately, it was Mike Bonnet. He saved the call. But we were able to start looking at that and saying, okay, how could this have been a more effective call? Well, if we were asking questions along the way and it was actually pulling the customer into the process rather than starting with all the questions up front and then trying to create a pitch out of it, which you wouldn't give us the time for, the success rate of the call would have been totally different. The second type of situation that we deal with more often is, hey, this is a scheduled demo. I'm going to have 3 or 4 of my managers in here. We're all going to take a look at it. See, then I have time to actually get into the question fact-finding, type discovery phase of the deal, where you can actually dig into their business a little bit, and that's actually really valuable. A mall kiosk, right, or at a conference or something like that. Again, you can't go in hard on questions in the beginning. It's got to be quick. It's got to be light. Otherwise, it gets too heavy and just too quick, too much, too fast. You freak her out, and she never calls you back again because you're crazy, right? So again, you have to understand the situation that you're in so that you apply questioning the right way. I would tell somebody in a Sprint kiosk that the way that you ask questions when somebody's walking by at a trade show or at a mall or something like that, the way you ask questions has to be different than if you're working in a retail store and somebody's coming in to see you. It just has to be different because the circumstances are different. One person's interested and they're coming to you, and the other one, the person's not even thinking about you, and you got to go jump in front of them and be like, hey, you want a free iPhone? I got one for you. You want to see how you can qualify? Right? So these are really important, and it's extremely important that you never try to bypass or shortcut this part of the process. I've tried to do this before. It doesn't work. Let's go to the phones real quick. Jack, what's going on?
My question is very straightforward. When I get into the call, I start qualifying the guy right away, right? My first question is like, oh, so this is your position, this is your capacity at the company, this is what you're doing. Now, I just want to know, what is it that would, how do I transition into not freaking them out? Like, how do I go into, a smoother transition of asking questions and not just going in head first?
What's the context of the call? Is this a cold call or is this a scheduled call?
Yeah, it's a cold call.
And then what product are you selling?
We're doing basically leads for companies instead of, doing lead generation. We're supplying them with verified data, sales intelligence, basically.
Yeah. So now remember that fact finding is the second step of the process. So the first step of the process is your introduction and your greeting. And so what you need to figure out is how your introduction and your greeting sets you up for your qualifying. So like an example could be, hey, this is Jared. I'm calling from big ass data company, and we have a way to provide you with qualified leads with guaranteed contact rates. Otherwise, we refund you the leads and credits. I'm calling today because I want to give you 15,000 leads absolutely free. Now, to be sure that you qualify, are you the person that is, the decision-making process for, a deal like this? Is this something that would be your, what do you call that? One of your responsibilities.
Right. So here's the thing. What I've noticed is I've had a kill ratio on my calls at a very high rate. Like, I just go in with the questions. I know what the prospect does, and I know how to get the meeting. It's really easy for me. That's not the problem. The only thing I've noticed that I've found emails to be more productive with regards to getting responses from prospects versus cold calling, where I'm just spending time and I'm just sitting on headquarter, numbers, and I'm not able to get, more prospects. Whereas if I'm doing emails, I can send like 50 emails a day and I still got like 1 or 2 people that I can convert. Whereas like cold calling, making 100 calls, it may be 3 connects. And then I got a kill ratio of like, I'd say 90%. So I convert 2 into meetings out of 3. But yeah. I don't think that's a really good number.
Well, so I mean, what I would tell you is that if you combine them both, you get 2 deals from email, you get 2 deals from phone calls, you have 4 deals rather than 2. So, gotcha. Like we never stand on one leg. Like we make a lot of phone calls here, but that doesn't mean we don't text. That doesn't mean we don't use social. That doesn't mean we don't use email. That doesn't mean we use video. That doesn't mean we use text message. That doesn't mean we send handwritten notes. That doesn't mean we don't do personal visits. Like we do everything.
Right.
We do everything. So your original question.
Always gotta be
yeah, you got to do. You got to be a
attack.
freaking maniac. Like you have to be like an activity maniac. Like I got guys that do not get up out of their desk except to take a piss and to grab like literally an 8-minute meal for lunch, and then they go back there because they're chasing opportunity. So like you have to be a maniac with activity. But what you were saying was, hey, how do I get into the call without feeling like I'm interrogating the guy? Well, your opening, your greeting should communicate enough value that he's like, okay, yeah, hey, I've got 5 minutes. I want to give you 15,000 free leads. I need 3 minutes. Can you give me 3 minutes? Yeah, I got 3 minutes. Okay, good. Tell me what you guys are doing to generate leads right now. Well, we use these 3 sources. Great. Which one of them is working best for you? Oh, this and that. Good. So part of our deal here is that we do this and this and that and that and that, and the way we qualify our leads and data match our needs and IP reverse whatever, track our leads is blah, 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 blah. Now tell me how this has been working for you. Now tell me how that has been. So you have to kind of like, number one, use your intro to get into the fact finding, and it has to be a value-based intro. And then when you're asking questions, again, you're asking questions where you're picking up data that's moving the customer into the sales process.
Right. Cool, man.
Past purchases, really have you guys ever purchased data before? What was your experience like? Was it worth it?
Well, that's another thing. Like one of the biggest problems is that people don't understand that what we're providing them is actually of very high value. It's like gold dust. But the problem is that they've had so many, buying experiences which have been so bad in the past that.
Bring them up. If the customer's thinking it, you have to let them know that you know that. This is Jared from XYZ Corporation. We're here to do blah, 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 blah. I want to give you some free leads. Can you give me 2 minutes to see if you qualify? Yeah, I got a minute. Or, nah, man, every time we buy leads, they're junk and it's a big waste of money. I completely understand. Most of the people that we talk to say the exact same thing. Here's exactly why we're different. We'll show you how we can put together a customized program for you, your company, your business, whatever. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, it would be great if I had somebody like you working side by side with me, bro.
Well, dude, you just need to work. You constantly need to be aware of these things. Like when you're running into problems on deal, and this goes for everybody. So this goes for everybody. Like you should be aware of what's happening in your deals. Like if you're running into roadblocks at a certain place, if customers are always saying this, like you have to acknowledge that and make a correction. You can't keep doing the same pitch over and over and over again and think that the customer's problems are ever going to change. In your business, unless there's some massive economic shift or new technology or something like that, you're going to have the same problems all the time. I was talking to a group this morning about that. Very important, never bypass the question-making process. You can ask questions along the way, but never bypass the question process. I want to give you an example of something that I did on a call about 2.5 years ago. It was a huge fail. I was working a deal with a big company, and I had been working directly with sort of like the director. And he and I had a lot of conversation back and forth about the needs and where they're at and their struggles and the opportunities and X, Y, and Z and blah, 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 blah. And so he finally got this guy on the phone, and he was like, hey, look, this guy's super direct, super to the point. He doesn't have a lot of time to bullshit around, and you've got to be like, you've got like 12 minutes with him. So I get all this in my head because this is what this guy's telling me. And so I move right into the deal, and what I'm doing is I'm actually presenting the product. I haven't asked any questions yet. I start presenting the product based on the data that I already knew from the other conversation. Well, this guy, who is a self-proclaimed sales expert, stopped the call. He goes, excuse me, can you stop for a second? I was like, yeah. And then he goes, so you're a sales training company, right? And I was like, oh, here we go. I was like, yes. And you guys are the best, right? Yes. You haven't asked me one question yet. And I was like, because I skipped the step. So it's if you have to pick between the two, between not asking the questions and moving into the process, or asking the questions and have somebody be like, hey, look, cut the BS, let's get into the call. Always, always, always go for the path that has them tell you, no, I don't want to go there, go here. because that way you always have your bases covered, right? And even if you have data before a call going into it, we had this conversation in a coaching session yesterday with one of the guys. Even if you have data, you have it from another person. You don't have it from the guy that you're on, or the gal that you're on the phone with. So their reality may be different. The manager you're talking to over here may have a problem with closing transactions or prospecting. And then over here, the executive may have a problem with turnover and customer experience or brand perception, or who knows, right? So you have to make sure that your questions are asked to gather you data to help you frame the pitch, how the person you're trying to sell needs to hear the presentation. Which means if you're pitching an influencer and you're pitching a decision maker, the executive, then you may have two separate pitches, because the influencer may have different needs and different focus and attention on problems than the executive. So you have to look at each of these cycles as like, hey, this is independent of this one, but the goal is to bring them together and get a deal done. So three ways that you can ask better questions. Number one, you should always, always, always focus on previous purchases or previous experiences with a product, a service, a vendor, type of whatever. Like so for us, when we're asking people questions, it's what are you doing for training right now? What have you done in the past? How did that work? And again, remember, people are going to hold their problems pretty close to them. So when we say, hey, like, what do you have attention on right now? Well, it's mainly, new hires. Why do you say that? So it wasn't the first question that I was looking for. It was the answer to the second question that I asked. Because when I say, hey, what do you have your attention on right now? And he says, my new hires, that could mean a whole lot of different things. A rookie will take that and go, okay, hey, now my problem's new hires. But the professional is going to go, tell me more about that. What do you mean by that? Interesting. Can you tell me more? Like dig into the problem a little bit, because the deeper you dig, the closer you're going to get to the frustration and the pain point. So the number one rule of asking questions is they should always focus on previous experiences, current, the way that they've done things before. People are creatures of habit. They like to repeat the way that they do things. If they make decisions and they write checks all up front versus they always pay month to month and they never sign contracts, whatever. Those are all things that you want to gather data on. Have you used a training company before? Have you used a lead company before? Have you ever taken a vacation like this before? When was the last time you purchased a house? How much did you pay for it? Did you think it was a good value? What'd you like best about it? What'd you like least about it? If you could change a few things, what would they be? So you want to ask those types of questions because it gets into their previous experiences and it can really set you up well for your presentation. Number two, your questions should always have a purpose related to the pitch. There should always be a reason you're asking the question you're asking. Don't just ask a question to ask a question. You should be looking at every word that you say as an investment in moving further down the process, getting closer to a decision. When you ask questions that are irrelevant, how's the weather where you're at right now? How many kids do you have? Dude, that's not relevant unless you're selling something to the kids or you're selling something that has to deal with weather. So like when you're in calls, like keep the focus on like asking good questions that are going to give you an answer that you can use to start building that story that will eventually become your presentation. And then rule number 3. Always, always, always get answers to your questions. This is something that I learned working real close with Grant. And he's like, dude, the power is getting an answer to a question. It's not asking a question, it's getting an answer to the question. Because you'll notice, like as you start making calls now, you'll notice that you ask questions that don't get answered and you keep moving on. It's really important to establish your authority in that call that you get answers to questions. They answer, you ask a question, they go on a tangent, you go right back to the question. Okay, yeah, that's good. Okay, now tell me, when was the last time you guys looked at something like this? Or whatever the question is. Those are 3 things that if you can nail in every call, in every presentation, in every interaction, I promise you, your pitch is going to start coming together, and then you're going to find out that there's much less resistance in the close. You bypass the question-making process, your pitch doesn't solve a problem, the close becomes a bear. And that's when you feel like you're fighting, and then they offer you a stupid, ridiculous offer because we never made the connection to their pain point. They're like, yeah, I'll give you, 25% of what it's worth. Give me 80% off. Give it to me for free. Let me use it for a few months. If it works, then we can do something from there. So questions are so important. It sets the tone for everything. So that when you set up the close, it's just like, that was easy.